Good afternoon, good morning, wherever it is or however it is you're seeing this. I am very pleased today to be talking to my old buddy, my old friend, Walter Mosley. We will talk some about the craft of mystery writing. We will get to that, but I'm going to start off with some sort of broader questions, some things that he has answered before, some things hopefully he hasn't had put to him before, but we shall see how it goes. And without further ado, Mr. Mosley, did you want to say a few words?
No, I mean that's fine. I'm really wondering what we're going to talk about. So,
All right then. Without further ado, I'll start with, I suppose, some of what you've been talking about. I know in other interviews lately, both in print and on radio, and which is to say, mystery writing now is at this kind of interesting crossroads, I suppose, as we come upon the events of George Floyd's murder, subsequent protests, and what have you. But the nature of, particularly as writers of color, particularly as Black writers writing in this field, and this is not a new discussion. I recall this discussion you and I and some others having, some years ago as we came into the field. But now, as we kind of are at this point, I guess the question then is, to start us off, is how do you see it changing your work, or not at all?
Well, for me and for many Black writers I know, including yourself, I don't see it as a big change. It's like one of the. It's not a problem. The crime writers, mystery writers, people who we really like Evan Hunter, Ed
Mhm.
McBain, Don Westlake. I mean, they were always, they were writing stuff. There were police in it. I think most of Don's policemen were corrupt. Of course, everybody in Don's books were corrupt.
Right.
Ed really kind of liked, policemen,
Right.
and
87th precinct.
yeah, and he
Yeah.
believed in them, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of people did. I can't hold that against them. As a child, even a Black child being raised in America, I was raised to respect police, to think that they were good and they were going to do good stuff. And it took me a while to grow into the fact that wasn't true.
Mhm.
There's nothing in any of my Easy Rawlins books. I mean, there are a couple of good cops, and even they're kind of confused, but
Mhm.
after a while, if you're smart enough, you learn how to change. I think that I was on a panel the other day with Rachel Housel Hall and S.A. Cosby, and we were talking about the police, and I said then what I've always thought is that the police are in a way a cult,
Mhm.
and so there might only be a few bad ones, but the other so-called good ones are never going to turn on them.
Yeah.
They're not gonna, if Abner Louima, never, got out of that jail, nobody would have known what happened to him,
Right.
because nobody is going to say, I'm going to take this, cop to, to justice.
That's right. Right.
Uh, and, I think it's more important for people like, the new Ed McBains and Don Westlakes and all those people to be able to make that argument. We've been making it forever, and people have been saying, well, you're a little, you're a little extreme. There are a lot of good policemen. I know a good policeman.
Yeah.
And I say to them, no, you don't.
Well, I mean, it is. You're right. I think it poses an interesting time period, because it's not as if the police procedural is going to go away. And I guess the question then is, or part of that is, and we've heard now from some other writers who are not necessarily Black, but also have write about the police, or some who have actually been police. How will it, how much that is going to affect how they portray the cops? It's funny you mentioned McBain. I thought about, he did have a particularly venal character, Fat Ollie Weeks, in as part of the 87th precinct. So I suppose even with that character, McBain was trying to at least look at some of that in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the racist cop, the corrupt cop. But even Fat Ollie Weeks occasionally would actually solve a crime. He would actually be totally wrong about how he got to it, but he would actually solve the mystery, or be part of solving the mystery. So I wanted to follow up, because I was thinking about this, because I thought about your work, and to some extent mine. Like, would you ever consider actually writing a police procedure, or at least not a procedure, but at least a book from the standpoint of a cop?
Well, I think it's 3 books ago now. I wrote a book, Down the River Onto the Sea,
Hmm.
my main character, King Oliver, uh, was a cop,
Right.
and he was such a good cop that he was going to bust a heroin ring that many people in the police department were making money off of. And so they gave him a death sentence, but he survived that due to, help of a friend inside the
Right.
department. And now he's living outside the department, and he still
Right.
doesn't know what happened,
Yes.
trying to figure that out. So he spends a lot of time talking to policemen. He's in relationships with his old dispatcher. There's some people he got jobs who are very committed to him, but still, like at one point a young Asian cop in New York
Yeah.
walks up to him and says, "Man, they turned you in over there." I said, "I don't understand it. If I found evidence that you did something, I just get rid of it." You know, so it was a nice thing to say to him, but it was a
Right.
tough thing to say, you know, and hiding an even bigger corruption. And
Yeah.
so I, but that's about the closest. I'm not going to get somebody in the department, like
Yeah.
in there, like Hill Street Blues or Law and Order.
Right.
It's that I watch that stuff, but it's really very fictional.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's why when you came up with Easy, is that why Easy was always an outsider? Is that why Easy was? I mean, he was a reluctant private eye, but he's a full-fledged private eye now. But he became a private
Well, I was writing about black men in Los Angeles in the late 40s up through the 50s and 60s. I didn't really have to make up anything. The police are not going to get along with Easy. If he sounds too smart, or if he sounds too
eye.
uppity, or if he
Mm-hmm.
walks too straight, or if he has too much money, or if he's standing next to a white woman, or I mean, there are
Yeah.
all these, or if he's in the wrong neighborhood or the
Yeah.
wrong car or whatever, he's going to be in trouble. So I just wrote about Easy.
Yeah.
That's the life he was living, and that's what am I going to say? It's like anything else that would be kind of making it up. It would be in a way science fiction, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. It'd be like, oh yeah, that didn't happen. It's like talking about President Lincoln's vice president being a black man or a black woman even
Yes.
president. So no, that didn't happen. It never happened. It couldn't happen.
Well, it could have happened with Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, but that's another story
That's
altogether.
another story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, and therefore the fantasy element.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of science fiction, I'm gonna get to some of the science fiction work, but I also thought about this when I was writing down my so-called questions, my interrogations. Um, there's a strong element of the supernatural that runs through your work. Wouldn't you say?
Um,
I'm
I'm
like
not
I'm thinking about,
wrong,
for
but
instance,
there is
how
certainly an
easy.
element of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, talk about it.
Well,
Why is it there?
it's interesting. I mean, I write science fiction, so like,
Yes.
and science fiction, is often, kind of made up stuff, made up thinking, and some of that I think is fantastical. Some of it is potentially logical in science. And
Right.
any book, even my book about the last days of Ptolemy Gray, when you have a man who is who's sinking into dementia in his 90s,
Mm.
but another guy comes up with a medicine that can give him back his memory for 6 to 8 weeks. And would he prefer that, and to die soon
Hmm.
after, or would he like to live another 10 years? And,
Yes.
and he takes it. Now, I mean, certainly people are working on these medicines day and night everywhere. So it's not like it's beyond the pale. It's not, writing about spaceships in 1920.
Right.
But and even in Easy Rawlins, there's a witch woman, Mama Joe,
Hmm.
who does things and knows things that nobody else can understand. A lot of them have a scientific base, but some of them, they seem way out there. And this is the life we live. There are things we know, there are things we don't understand. There's how our communities work, and so yeah, it's certainly there,
Yeah.
that sense of the supernatural, but not that much.
Yeah. But yeah. All right. All right. We'll circle back to some of that.
Okay.
Um, not I'm going to get off the police thread here in a second, but so this is not quite the police thread, but I was thinking about this in the context of writing black characters, some of whom well they skirt the law, but some of whom are more like Mouse or more like Easy, right? There's a range there, but some of that's kind of more pushed together. I guess the question I really was interested in is, do you feel hampered or hamstrung if you write a character, a black character who does bad, who does real bad? Do you worry that there's a reaction out there, that you're, bringing down the race, that you're showing us not in the best light?
Hmm. Well, I haven't had too many people say that to me. Um, Somebody might be thinking it. People love Mouse, and Mouse does really bad things. I
Yes, he
mean,
does.
right now in time, he's a professional heist man. He works anywhere in North America. He robs. It sets up and robs. Banks, savings and loans, armored car company.
Bigger,
You name it, he'll rob it.
right?
And if you mess with him, he'll kill you. I mean,
That's
that's
right. That's right.
and it's like even if you don't mess with him too bad, he might kill you. It depends on how he's feeling right then.
Yes.
But the idea that I think that we live inside of a system of laws that if we're honest with it, it's going to be fair with us.
Right.
That's just not true. Black people
Mhm.
know that's not true. That's not the life we live, and that any moment I can be, stopped, blamed for something, and thrown into prison, without a response, especially if you're poor.
Mhm.
And so I don't think my readers I think a reader will understand when a main character, regardless of race,
Mhm.
does something wrong because they are the most deeply involved person in that crime, in that mystery, and that unraveling. And if
Yeah.
somebody has to die in order to save a true innocent, hey,
Yes.
it's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to switch gears for a second. I think I might know the answer to this, but I'm always, whatever. Um, what is your, what would you consider to be the way in which you figure out what you want to write next? Is it stimulus from whatever the news, or is it something somebody says? I mean, it could be, something you run across in the paper. I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, I am actually curious. I don't think I've ever asked this question. How do you figure out what you want to do next?
well, there are a lot of different ways of doing it. Sometimes I write down a sentence or have a thought, and I go, "Oh, that could be a good novel.
Hmm.
Maybe I should try that." Recently, when Toni Morrison died, I decided I was going to write a book in response to her early works.
Yes.
Just to kind of figure that out. Sometimes a publisher gives me a contract for 2 or 3 books, and so you know, the day comes where I have to start writing a book. So that I got to figure out something to write. Might have been something I think about. I might be just me writing.
Right.
I think there's a lot of different ways to come about what you're doing. You have a painter. She's been doing forest scenes for the last 10 years. She just had a baby, and now she spends her days sketching the baby.
Right.
And it's what you're experiencing in your life, how your life is going, who what's happening. I just finished writing a short story about COVID-23.
There
It's
you go.
like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something you do, right?
Yeah. um, well, that does remind me though. Do you pick up and abandon ideas and then come back to them maybe even years later?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll have had an idea, and it'll be kind of waiting around, and then
Right.
one day I go, oh, wait a second, I might even have forgotten it, and I'm looking through my computer, and I said, what's this? Oh, that sounds interesting.
That
Oh,
sounds good.
I could write that story.
Why'd I stop doing that?
Exactly.
Uh, um, well, all right. So do you? I'm going to get to the science. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the science fiction,
Hmm.
only in the context of, do you worry about? You don't worry about obviously being categorized one way or the other, but do you consciously think, for instance, thinking about Easy for a minute, um, and thinking about Easy has aged more or less aged normally. Although now I
Right.
think with the Witchy Woman that maybe is slowing down a bit. I'm not sure about that. Like in a like in the Marvel Comics
No,
way.
he's actually stayed the same. Like, it's 69 and he's born in 1920, so now he's 49 years old. I mean,
Right.
he's always with it, however many years he is away from 1920.
Right. Okay. All right. So you don't foresee necessarily, or maybe you do foresee a novel in which Easy is in the future, and yet somehow he's been preserved in some kind of way, some kind of scientific way.
I have a novel, a collection of short stories coming out in September called The Awkward Black Man. And there's a company, there's a few kind of sciences that have to come together. One about cloning bodies,
Yes.
another about reading the content of the brain, storing it, and then putting it into another body.
Hmm.
So you have an old body, a young body, and this thing. And they brought this rap entrepreneur from Detroit, this big, physics and biological company to run it, because they realized what they needed is a salesman. And so he's done all this stuff, he's done all this stuff to make it happen. And of course, at the end of it, he's the only one who's in prison. Like, he convicted of murder, he's been, this and that and the other, and at the very end of the story, it's a thousand or so years in the future.
Right.
There are very few humans left at all in the world. And he comes to awareness, and he's been copied into one of these machines that he used in the very
Right.
beginning. And the biomechanical life of the future treats him as God, because they see him as the person who created them.
Right.
So it's possible.
It's possible. All right. And now I have a question that only true Marvel fans can appreciate, such as ourselves. Having now just read recently this wonderful graphic novel in the form of a graphic novel biography of Jack Kirby.
I haven't seen
I had read a couple of course, some of the prose kind of biographies of Jack Kirby, the Ronan Road book, and then there's one by Mark Evanier, which is mostly a picture book, Kirby stuff, and then there's little bio pieces put in. But this guy, Tom Scioli, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who is himself a comics artist, has written this. It's really wonderful, right? Jack Kirby, the king of comics, and he uses Kirby's own words and what have you. So all that is a big intro to say this, or to ask this question, which is to say, of the Marvel characters that which are numerous and many and varied, if you could write the super team, like your own form of the Avengers, right? You don't have to name a whole bunch of them. Just give us a few names. But I'm interested to know why. Who would you have in that team, and why would you have that person or machine, right? In some case, if it's the Vision, right? He's a robot. In your lineup.
An android, please.
Yes, an android. That's correct.
That's a question that doesn't fit me very well, and I'm going to tell you why.
Fan.
I am a big Marvel fan, and
we can come back to it.
When people talk to me about, they'll talk to me about, because the sport I like is boxing, but people talk to me about football, baseball, soccer, various things. And I tell them in a really strong way, I do not believe in team sports. I just don't. The wonderful thing that Marvel does is, with the exception of the Fantastic Four, the teams are always breaking up.
Yes, that's right.
They hate each other. They got to go different places. They die.
Well, even the Fantastic Four bicker, right? Even they,
They bicker, right? And they did it wonderfully, especially the thing in the Human Torch.
That's right, exactly.
That's the way I'm always seeing it. So I see individuals.
Yes.
And it's really hard for me to want to be in a team, because I've never done it, and I don't believe that it's natural.
Right.
I mean, people believe it's natural, but usually only in war,
yes.
which is something I could do without.
Right, right, and that's invariably how some of these teams always come together, right? There's some crisis, there's some
Right.
right external thing, Thanos or whatever the hell it is, and it's coming at them, and then they sort of come together and they solve it, and they stay together, but invariably, yeah, things still, their own egos or what have you, start to drive them apart, and then they realize, kind of like, if you rush into a marriage, oh right, I guess I really don't want to be with this person. I really don't trust them to have my back 24/7.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I was just curious, but we you can think about it, because I'm still kind of interested to know, even
No,
if
I
it's a
think about it over
non-team.
time,
Yeah.
but it's not something that would immediately jump to mind.
Right.
It's
There. Okay. All right. I suppose I should get to a craft question again, just for the sake of getting to a craft question, which is, is always important. When you're writing a novel, specifically when you're writing a novel, how much in the way, I think I know this question, but how much in the way of rewriting do you do, or do you sort of stop and work on it and, go back, go forward, or do you just kind of go all the way through and then go all the way back again and once you're done? Like once you're done with the first draft?
um, I was talking to Gloria Naylor once, and I was telling her, I said, well, Gloria, when I write a novel, it's I do at least 20 drafts.
Woo.
And one of those drafts is almost always reading it out loud into a tape recorder.
Wow.
I should say digital recorder, because time is.
Yeah.
And she was shocked. She went, "You do that?" And I said, "Yeah, don't you?" And she said, "Oh, no. All my books, I just write in one draft." So, but when I work on movies and stuff, then I write 20 drafts, which is like, the complete opposite way that I think. I love I love, well, writing to me is rewriting.
Okay.
Just like reading is rereading. And somebody come up to me and they said, "I just read War and Peace." I said, "How many times?" They go, "Well, once." I said, "Well, you haven't read it yet. You got the sketchy outline."
Right.
Once, it's the same with everything. I mean, I get that. You get that out of studying poetry, because in poetry, rewriting is the thing. You're writing again and again and again just to get every word right in the right place. And I think in fiction, it's not that much. But I think that, because you really want to make the language sing.
Yeah.
You don't just want to, in some kind of flat tone, tell a story.
So you do. So you actually listen. So you'll listen to the actual playback to get some sense of like pace and flow.
And the sound of language. If somebody says something, you wrote some sentence down that sounded really good when you wrote it, but when somebody says it out loud, you say, "Nobody ain't gonna say any of that. They're not gonna talk like that. What's wrong with you?" You got to fix that up. Yeah.
All right. Very good. I like that. I might have to try that. I might have to steal that technique. I like that.
Hey, it's yours.
Yes. All right. Thanks. All right. So, I have it right here. Do I have it? Yes. I got to hold it up. I'm going to hold it up for the camera. This is a book you wrote several years ago, Folding the Red into the Black. And this is a nonfiction book, folks. This is not fiction, but it applies to the fictive discussion we're having, because I was very struck by, there's a phrase you talked about, or there was a part of the book where you talked about we're both adaptive and restless beings, which I really thought was really to the point. And I am curious to know how that thematically plays out among your characters. I mean, both Mouse and Easy, but of course Fearless and some of the others. I mean, how do you think that plays out in terms of, when you present these characters on the page?
Well, I think that most of us, I mean, it's interesting in the genre, that we're in. A lot of our characters are heroic in a really an accepted sense of the word. And so there are certain things about their character which don't alter or change, and they don't, to a great degree, question fundamental issues in their nature, and they move forward.
Yeah.
Like they succeed. They're going after the killer. They may not catch the killer, but they got close.
Right. Right.
They might end up in trouble at the end, but at least they tried. They tried hard to get there.
Right.
Um, in this book that I've just done, the awkward black man, uh, you have characters who are really, in many ways, you might look at them and call them losers, but I don't think that that's the case. Like there's
Hmm.
this one guy who he realized his company has to hire some black people. He works in finance, kind of in a bank, but it's a Wall Street company. But he
Yes.
goes and says, I want to be in your company. And they said, well, we're trying to hire African Americans. And he gets his back goes up and he goes, well, I'm not an African American. And she says, well, we're hiring African Americans and you look like you are. And the guy says, look, you got an Italian name, right? You're an Italian American, right?
Yeah.
Says, well, I said, and somebody could be a Mexican American and somebody could be a Canadian American, a Franco American. He said, Africa's a continent. How can you be you don't call an Italian a Euro American? You call him an Italian American, and it's like,
Right.
and of course, this is just going to make sure that he doesn't get his job, but he's willing to kind of sabotage himself on a fairly small issue,
Mm.
to somebody from outside looking in, because he's committed to who he is.
Yeah.
And I think that commitment, brings it, that, we're restless and we're adaptable and we want to change.
Mm.
And the adaptable part is maybe you are and maybe you aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can and maybe you can't. I know a lot of very heroic Black people in America who refuse to give in.
Mm-hmm.
I was the other day. I was talking to a guy, a friend of mine, and I may be working on this a film, not a documentary, a film about Louis Armstrong.
Yeah.
And this guy, he's like, from back in my generation a little earlier, he said to me, "No, man, you can't do that." Satchmo was Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
And you're gonna go, well, yeah, but he also invented jazz, and so I'm going to adapt to whatever you're saying. I don't. It's not that I agree that he's an Uncle Tom, but
Right.
a lot of things that he did, people might interpret that way.
Yeah.
But that's only part of the complex man, and I think
That's
that's it. Complex people are what we have to deal with.
Well, you're right. So and it's certainly in mining that complexity, that the character emerges, but also the situations emerge that character will find themselves in. So I am curious, and kind of on this thread, is it that, and I've thought about this a lot, and I guess it's come up sometimes, which is to say, going backward again for a second in terms of this notion of change and the notion of what's acceptable in terms of the heroic character. Is it that in particular, is it that the private eye, it's been talked about that the private eye maintains the status quo, that even though the private eye is outside of the law and tries to do something to further maybe a personal justice or, a justice for their neighbor, right? Somebody comes to them with a problem and they try to solve that problem. And that problem sometimes can bring them up against the status quo, bring them up against the forces, the power brokers, etc. But in the end, it's not as if the private eye is like Ali LaPonte in the Battle of Algiers, although that could be an interesting character, right? The character that decides to become a revolutionary. So I guess that's the question. The question really is the genre, is the confines of the genre such that the private eye can't break out of that, or is it that the private eye, right, sort of by their fate, by their definition, find themselves, as part of not supporting the status quo, but also not necessarily overthrowing the status quo?
Evan Hunter / Ed McBain, and he had
Right.
another too, right? But anyway,
who asked his real name, which was
Italia
or something. I can't remember now. Yeah.
But anyway, he did a collection of not short stories but novellas.
Yes.
And he had like 10 or 12 people writing novellas, and he asked me to write one.
Yes.
And I said, okay, and I wrote this story called Archibald Lawless, Anarchist at Large. Archibald, He's a big Bakunin, fan. He has all these problems. He works with unions. He's against the system. He
Right.
believes in anarchy, but
Yeah.
he also understands that a lot of people who start, with very good political ends end up being co-opted or altered by a system, formed by a
Yes.
system that is anti anarchist.
Right.
So he kind of polices these organizations. One day, there's a guy who comes in with a bomb on a certain floor down on Wall Street, and he's going to blow up these 15 people in this building.
Yes.
And they ask Leonid, will he? I'm not Leonid. They ask Archibald, will he help?
Archibald.
And Archibald goes, no, I won't. And they said, why? Because that office you're talking about is the CIA, secret office.
Mm.
And the guy that's in there going in is Lebanese. And they blew up this town in Lebanon that
Yeah.
he's talking about.
Yeah.
So, and he's going to blow himself up with them. That's a perfect anarchist move. I will do nothing to stop him.
Mm.
And then they say to him, oh, but there's a janitor who's stuck in a room and he won't let him out, and he's going to get killed too, and he's innocent.
Right.
And Archibald said, well, I got to do something about that. At least I got to get that janitor out of
Yeah.
there.
Right.
Now, I can work with that character
Yeah.
all the way outside of the status quo.
There you go.
He's not following the status quo. He's not thinking about the status quo.
Right.
He won't talk to a policeman, and it's like, so it can be done. And I think Andrew Vax had characters like that,
Mm-hmm.
I think,
It's a Burke.
I think there are a lot of, there are ways to go there,
Yes.
And though I do agree with you, most people, in the genre are maintaining the status quo.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so it begs the question now, it's kind of bringing us a bit full circle, but in this time period that we're in, that we've talked about in the context of now writing these fictions in as a reality imposes upon us about police abuse and et cetera. And by the way, I should mention, I don't want to forget that next week is the 55th anniversary of the Watts Uprising. How about that for the context for all this? So all that to say is that I wondered then, do you think that among some of the younger folks coming along now, maybe there'll be more of this upsetting of the status quo, more of this notion about, pushing these sort of accepted boundaries of the genre out more?
Of course. It's like rock and roll.
Yeah.
All the way up to hip hop, and hip hop, which is, even more potent than rock and roll because it's Black music presented to white people by Black musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Not Elvis Presley doing hip hop,
doing a cover, yeah,
Tupac or Biggie or whatever,
right?
And so I think that rather than overturning the status quo, it's creating a new one.
Mm.
And so our job remains the same, to question the new status quo.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway.
No, I don't want to cut you off. That was good. All right. All right. I got a couple more. I guess we'll circle back to craft for another take at that, another throw at that. What's harder to write? Science fiction short story or mystery short story?
Oh, I don't think anything's harder. I can't write poems. I love poetry, and I think poetry informs writing, but I can't write them.
Yeah.
But I just can't write them. So that's just it. It's the form, not the content.
Okay.
But when it comes to content, like if it's science fiction or a mystery or so-called literary fiction, it's all kind of the same to me. It depends on where I'm trying to go.
Yes.
If where I'm trying to go doesn't work in a mystery format, then I don't,
Yeah.
If it doesn't work in a sci-fi format, I don't, It's just like, it depends what I'm trying to write about and how these characters are going to unfold. That tells me what the genre is going to be.
Okay. All right. And you certainly not opposed to obviously then switching gears in the middle of it as you get into it, understanding that, okay, right, where I want to go is
Yeah.
is going to take me this other direction, which therefore will be classified in a certain way, which may or may not be relevant. I mean, to you as the writer, which is, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes when I write a short story, I guess I mash them up, right? I guess I it starts out as a mystery, then it becomes a science fiction thing, but then it doesn't, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And that's fun.
Yeah, and it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, in a certain way, I think
I'm reminded that I had I think it was maybe it was the last couple of conversations I had with Octavia Butler.
Yeah.
She was saying, she said to me, Walter, you're doing the right thing. And I said, what do you mean, Octavia? Because, she's so smart. You had to make sure that you knew what she was talking about. And she said, well, everybody thinks I'm a science fiction writer.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm limited in certain ways. She told me about, she had a neighbor once, and the neighbor was a physicist or something. And she gave him her book, him and his wife, they're both physicists. And one day, about a month later, she said, well, did you get a chance to look at my book? And they told her, and said, oh, we looked at it and we saw it was science fiction, so we gave it to our children.
Huh.
And it's something she hated that. And she hated that people did that. But of course, science fiction is the most vilified genre. Listen, and in both ways, like I've written 13 books of science fiction and nobody's ever called me a science fiction writer. I've never been invited to any science fiction convention or be on a panel or anything. They say, well, he's just playing around. I look at people, I said, but I've written more books in science fiction than you have. I say, yeah, but I'm real. And,
there you go. That's true.
And I'm like,
call me a sci-fi writer.
I don't mind, because I write my books, I have fun, but it's an interesting notion.
There you go. Do you still maintain your regime of is it 3 hours a day you write?
Yeah, every morning. Yeah.
Every morning. Yeah. All right. That's good. I mean, that's good. It's important. What else I want to ask you? Well, I want to go back to so all right, because I can't get off the Marvel question, man. I got to have the comics question back. All right, so we can't have a team. All right. Can you give us two? Give me two. Give me two characters you would put in motion to fight this threat, whatever the threat is, and why you choose those two.
Well, I always liked the Thing.
Yes.
Fantastic Four, because he was like mostly human.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't, it wasn't like the Hulk. It wasn't like Thor. He wasn't, it wasn't even like, Johnny Storm and his near nova flame, whatever he did, but he was incredibly strong. And he talked, like I understood Black people talking.
Yes.
They would, instead of give me, he would go, gimme.
Right.
And enough said. And, like he would be very cool. So I like him as a character, because he's somewhat vulnerable and very dangerous.
That's right. And he hated being the Thing. He hated being trapped in that.
Yeah, he hated it. He
wanted
rock
orange body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just so happens, I was thinking about this the other day, there were a lot of characters in the first 15 Spider-Man comic books that I just loved.
Yeah.
The Chameleon, to the Vulture, to Dr. Octopus, to the Sandman, to Craven the Hunter, Mysterio, the Enforcers.
Right.
The Enforcers were so great because they had no powers at all.
That's right.
One was strong, one knew judo, the other knew how to throw a lariat.
Exactly.
I was like, this is great, and every time, and the characters, one of the great things, I mean, I love Jack Kirby, no question. One of the great things about Steve Ditko, he really made characters look interesting.
That's right. Yeah.
You looked at them, and they had different characters based on how they looked.
That's right. And they're never overly muscled. They were always real figures. They were always, that was, yeah.
The Lizard. I mean, you can't beat those creatures, man. I mean, it's like all of the, and so like whenever I think about it, I would love to do, something with a kind of an expanded Sinister Six, those characters, and without them just being, evil and kind of,
right,
in their own, really smart but stupid in their own way,
I love that. It was oh my God, it was one of the comic books my aunt threw out, but I had that one where the was Spider-Man. I think it was a cover of Spidey's coming down, and the three enforcers are there on the one side of the cover there. That was great. That was a Ditko cover, man. Anyway, that's neither here nor there now. All right, so at least we've gotten a little bit into the Marvel universe. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm pleased. All right. Well, what haven't I asked you, or what haven't I covered that you want to cover? Before we wind up.
That's, I mean, it's a good question. I'm not sure. You know, that I think the challenge that faces young writers, especially young writers of color.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you and I started out, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, it was a different world.
Yeah.
They were not publishing Black people. It was not a question of like, well, what are they doing with my book? I'd go, what book?
What book? That's right. Or the classic, well, we already have one Black mystery writer, so
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you say, well, you have many white mystery writers.
Mystery writers, you got a ton of them.
I don't understand what you mean.
Exactly.
But I think that there's a challenge. There's a challenge in the world that that it does take really hard work and to understand, like in organizations like Boucher Khan, like to have the convention, when you see there are a lot of writers, of all, genders and races who don't have any money and are trying their best to get published.
Right.
And that I think that we need to be aware of that, and we need to accept that. So, yeah, well, this guy, he's a dishwasher and he's writing mysteries.
Right.
It really doesn't matter what color he is, what gender they are, and I just, and I just want to remember, that to know how hard it is for us, how hard the road has been, and how you and I, to a great degree, have been part of the thing that opened that road, that blazed that trail, that you, me, Gar Anthony Haywood, Valerie Wilson Wesley,
our good friend Eleanor Taylor Bland.
Yeah. There's a whole group of us back then, but that was all of us. Right now,
that's right.
I belong to, Crime Writers of Color, there's like 250 members.
Exactly.
It's amazing. I'm shocked when I see that many.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. And we have to be there for each other.
Yeah.
And we have to bring who we are out into the world in a new way. That like you and I, we used to go from city to city. We with our group of Black crime writers and do readings and talks and stuff like that. I think it's important for us to do that. To have one kind of middle of the road writer, maybe a major writer, some new writers, and then and go do readings and talks and events in places. I think it's a really important thing. I mean, it's a political thing,
right?
And but it's our world to make. I guess that's what I'm saying.
There we go.
It's our world to make.
Wow.
And it's not like, say, well, those white publishers. Well, listen, man, we all know what white publishers are. So, like, it's not like you can't start making up stuff. I mean, we know what that's like. It's always been like that.
Yeah.
We have to make the difference.
That's right.
Yeah.
There we go. Very good. All right, man. That's perfect.
Hi, my name is Walter Mosley, and I have the honor of being given the Lifetime Achievement Award in BoucherCon 2020. This is the award. I'm extremely happy to have it, and I feel very proud of having received it. For many reasons, it is a great honor to be receiving this award. First, it is just the recognition of my community that elates me and helps me to believe that I haven't been fooling myself the past 3 decades. For me, BoucherCon has always been the blood pumping through the veins of our loose-knit body of literature. I've been to quite a few of these meetings around the nation. In a way, it has always felt like we were trying to hold the country together through a common thread of inescapable criminality and ultimate justice. Another reason I'm so pleased for this award is that it comes from an organization for the man variously known as William Anthony Parker White, H. Holmes, also known as Herman W. Mudgett, both the same man who was a 19th century American serial killer. And finally, Anthony Boucher, the writer of science fiction and crime stories, a publisher, editor, critic, radio host, and all-around literary giant. I love the genres of the writers who, like Bronco Busters, try their hand at every rodeo challenge. Boucher was a man who knew that our writing was and is the future, that we, together here, over millions of miles of fiber optic lines, are creating a world of fiction that is more real than any so-called nonfiction writer. That our work defines the term literary because it expands the mind and soul as our world grows exponentially. I thank you for this honor, and I promise to try to keep the ball rolling.